Hello everyone, I am back with a new video after quite a long break. So I am going to look at another game in the Nimzo Indian, and actually again quite an old game, but I just figured out today actually that one of the variations of this Queen B3 Nimzo, which is the Spielman variation, is called the Stahlberg variation. And Stahlberg is going to be with the white pieces against legendary Grandmaster Nimzowitch. So let's see how this game went and what is the Stahlberg variation. Okay, so Nimzo Indian, Queen B3, C5, takes, Knight C6, Knight F3, Knight E4, absolute main line, white plays Bishop D2, and here the main move is Knight takes on D2, where I hope to bring you some more model games, but it's not so easy to find, I have to say, because the variation is rare. So, and back then they did not really play in the way which we recommend in the course. But anyway, in this video we are going to look at Knight takes on C5, which is actually called the Stahlberg variation. So this move is also normal, it attacks the queen and gains the tempo. It's not too bad. White went queen c2, obviously, short castle, and a3. So here, contrary to the main line where black is taking the bishop, now white is gaining the bishop pair, since obviously bishop a5 is not possible to b4, and it's a fork. So bishop takes on c3, bishop takes on c3, and now of course white has a big threat in the form of b4 and kicking this knight, and basically it cannot go anywhere else than a6, which is not ideal. So black has two options. One is to go f5 and with that control the e4 square for the knight, or to go a5 and with that control the b4 square, so white cannot chase away the knight just yet. So in this game Nimzowitch went for this latter version, a5. So the point is very simple. b4 is simply met by take, trade on a1, and the pawn is falling on b4, so black is completely winning. So it is not a move. g3 was played in this game, which is a decent move in my opinion, and already shows like very good understanding from white. And again, this game was almost 100 years ago played, so it's really remarkable to me. So if I would play this game without any knowledge, like opening knowledge or preparation, then I would most likely play b3 in this position. And indeed, it's not a horrible move. I mean, it's a decent move, but the thing is that this d3 pawn can, this b3 pawn can become vulnerable in some variations. So of course, the point that basically this prevents a4, since now after b4 the knight has absolutely nothing to do on b3. It's not an outpost, but it's outpost in the other meaning of the word, that the knight is like kind of out of the game in some posts. Yeah, it's completely useless, cannot take part in the game. But obviously black is not gonna make that move, and maybe at some moment queen b6 can happen, or even just later in the game this pawn can be under attack. So that, once again, there is no problem with this move, but it's actually better not to make it. and g3 is not making this move, obviously. So in the course, the recommendation is rook d1 with some variations, and the idea is just a little bit more flexible than g3. So depending on how black replies, white can still go with the bishop to g2, or in some cases even go like e3 and bishop d3 to target the h7 pawn. But yeah, this is obviously done by quite a bit of analysis with modern engines. So rook d1 is maybe better. But in any case, the point of white and the point of rook d1 as well is that white is not really afraid of a4, because it will give the b4 square for the bishop, and maybe that pawn on a4 later can become a target. And knight b3 is an outpost, even the pawn is not on b4 now but on b2, but still that knight on b3 is not that annoying since the rook is coming to d1 anyway. So yeah, basically that's white's point here, and yeah, it's quite a decent one. Okay, so one other interesting aspect of this game is that it was a match between Stahlberg and Nimzowitch, and this is game 5 of that match. They already reached this exact same position in the game 3, basically 2 days ago. Back then, this exact same position in that game, Nimzowitch went for queen e7. So the idea is to eventually play e5. Okay, here I am not sure what is the correct way for white to go, but again, theoretically it's not so important because the course recommends a different way. But one idea is good to know, in my opinion, that e5 followed by d6 wants to cut this knight out from the game. So a very logical move would be to play knight to d4. So if black trades, I mean we are fine with bishop takes back, and if black is playing e5, then the knight can, for example, jump to f5. Also doesn't look too bad. Maybe later rerouting to d5. So if your opponent threatens with e5, like in this case, it's a very normal idea to go with knight d4. And if you decide not to, so for example, bishop g2, e5, short castle. So that was how the game went, the third game of the match. And here black has only one move, so we shouldn't forget that with castling the rooks are protecting each other, so b4 is a pretty much positionally winning threat for white, so black has to play a4. And now Stahlberg played knight d2, basically with the idea of playing b4 and undermine this blockade, but it's really not the way to punish this or to get any advantage. I mean, the position was equal. He later won the game, so it was okay for him, but it's rather better to go in the other direction with the knight to h4, to this square of f5, and if black goes d6, then again rook d1, and kind of pretend that our pieces are fine, knight b3, we are not too afraid, and if black is ever gonna weaken the king side, there will be chance to go with f4 or knight f5 at some moment, and white's chances are still preferable here. So this was game 3. Nimzowitch lost, and in game 5 he went for a4 right away, so he doesn't have to worry about b4. But I mean, this is a different plan. What he's gonna do here, hard to say if it's better or worse. I mean, in both cases I believe white has the better chances. Okay, so bishop g2, it's normal move, b6, short castle, and bishop b7. So now Nimzowitch is rather developing the queen side, and he's planning to make moves like knight a5, for example, to attack on c4 and to have kind of strong control over the light squares. So it's basically in the previous game with d6, e5, he wanted dark square control, now he rather attacks on the light squares. So white went rook a d1, I mean very natural, the rook belongs there. And yeah, many times in this queen b3 Nimzo, the problem for black is, you know, this pressure on the d5, so the d pawn cannot be protected by another pawn, so it's always an issue for black. So black went knight to a5, attacking the pawn, but very comfortable reply for white is bishop b4, not only protecting the pawn, but also pinning the knight to the rook. So now bishop e4, queen to c3. It's quite a reasonable game from both sides up to this moment. White is slightly better, but okay, Nimzowitch wrote, you know, a very famous book, or he has this very famous concept of blockade. He loved this concept of blockading in general, you know, in many different cases. And okay, he played knight a to b3, so it's like very beautiful blockade on the queen side, we can say, but unfortunately the knights are a little bit, I mean, besides blockading, I mean, there is another half of the board where the, you know, where things can happen, and these things did happen in this game. So yeah, it's, the position is not that closed, so to say, by this knight. I mean, the queen side is completely closed in a way, but black still has some other weaknesses. So I would say this knight a to b3 was the first, you know, very natural looking move, but you know, black rather had to, instead of blockading, to create some counterplay, and for that purpose the move of rook c8 was better. So the idea is that black lines up against the c4 pawn, and maybe rather later the other knight jumps to b3, so this pawn can get under attack. One possible variation here is like knight d4, trading the bishops. Okay, now black goes out from the pin, and I guess what Nimzowitch didn't like, and okay, many people wouldn't like particularly, is that instead of that, you know, nice looking knight on b3, he has doubled b pawns, and okay, knight b5 is coming. It looks quite nice for white, but black has moves like d5, for example, and position is not so simple. So white is fighting for the advantage, but black also has some chances. In any case, this was definitely the better way to go. After knight a b3, the position becomes much easier to play for white, and white played the excellent move knight d4. It's basically, you know, starting to undermine the blockade and trade the active black pieces, like the bishop on e4, for example. So now bishop takes on g2, king g2, and rook e8. So going out from the diagonal, so the knight can recapture on b3, which happened in the game. So knight takes, knight takes. So the blockade is still wonderful on the queen side, but let's say if we don't count these two files, maybe I can even add c file to this. Then there are still 5 other files where the game can be decided. And now actually Stahlberg gave back something to Nimzowitch by playing rook d6, which is a really strong blockading move, blockades the d7 weakness. He's planning to play rook fd1, attacking on d7, and also keeps an eye on the b6 pawn. So yeah, position is already quite difficult for black. Queen c7, rook fd1, d7 pawn is hanging, rook d8, protecting, and now yeah, basically white's queen is not attacking anything at the moment, so that was the next step for white. It was queen f3, already with some, you know, very obvious tactical trick like rook takes d7, right? So if black would open the back rank, there is a rook takes d7, and in case black takes back, what else to do, then there is queen a8. So that was a problem, and of course black cannot get counterplay with queen c4 because of the rook d7. Sorry, the game is pretty much over. There is no even rook f8 because the bishop can take on f8, and otherwise d8 and f7 is hanging at the same time. So the game is over. So after queen f3, black moved the rook from the attack, and now queen g4. The queen is getting closer to the king and also very nicely protecting on c4, so still absolutely no counterplay for black. And now the threat is bishop to c3, lining up against the g7 pawn. So black played f6. Now bishop c3, threatening to take on f6, so king went to h8 and queen h4. So now bishop takes f6 sacrifices almost always should work with, you know, white is getting 2 pawns, the queen is coming with a check, and only the rook needs to appear on the 4th or 5th rank, and it's a checkmate. So bishop f6 is a very annoying threat, so very understandable that Nimzowitch played e5. So with this move he is avoiding all these sacrifices, but there was a very nice refutation of this move. And why was it possible? Because this knight is on a location on b3 doing absolutely nothing. Since the game is not decided on the queen side, the rook on b8 is not taking part in the game. And here Stahlberg played rook takes f6. Extremely strong move. G takes f6, I mean, otherwise it's just a pawn. Queen takes on f6, king g8. You know, and it would be extremely simple if bishop takes e5 would win. But bishop takes on e5 is losing because of queen c6 is a check. So white has to trade queens and cannot even take the rook because d1 is hanging. So, you know, if it was just bishop e5, then I would say, okay, very easy tactical trick from white, but, you know, what white had to see in this position is really, really nice, and, you know, kind of epic way of showing the power of blockade against Nimzowitch himself. So it was rook to d6, completely keeping these pieces out of the game. And now bishop takes e5 is a threat, or queen g5 check at some moment, and black simply has no pieces to defend this lonely king on g8. So the game is completely over at this point. Black would have actually resigned at this moment. Really, there is nothing to do. He played rook f8, queen takes on e5, rook takes f2 check. I mean, white could also take on f2, and then this was black's hope to enter this endgame down 2 pawns, completely hopeless, but at least not checkmate. But Stahlberg just went king g1. He just wanted to give checkmate or win the queen. Black went king f7 and resigned the game after rook f6 check. So the point is that after rook takes on f6, he takes on c7, and now not only both rooks but the pawn on d7 is hanging. Black is completely falling apart, so the resignation was completely correct at this point. So I believe it's a quite nice game from white. And yeah, main thing is obviously this ideas with a4. So it looks a little bit positionally dangerous for white, but actually using the weak squares or sometimes weak pawn can become a problem for black. And as we saw in this game, that if black tries to very seriously restrict white's options on the queen side, then it's possible to get under attack on the king side. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you soon with another video.